system. Does not have color in it. You can certainly find people that work with encaustic wax that has color and they paint with it. I use it as a layering because the color I bring is all from the chalk, the pastel. And then sometimes I'll take pieces of wood or tools and I'll draw back into the wax, which on all of these pieces you see there are lines somewhere in them. And those lines then, once I draw the lines into the wax, I'll put oil paint. Really it's a stick I use, oil stick. And I rub it all over the piece so it might actually turn all black. And then I take baby oil and you rub it all out. And so it just stays in the lines that you've drawn over the wax. So it's a really fun process. And as I was explaining to Susan, I usually make some rules for myself when I'm working on a series of pieces. So after I picked the 6 pieces that I wanted to do, a couple of rules that I made for myself were a lot of the words that she used dealt with the body. And I've been really fascinated by the human body anyway in my work, so it was kind of good timing. And I'd use a book called Gray's Anatomy often with my pieces. And so every piece had to have a piece of that book in it. So on each of them you'll see there's some part of the human body in there. And then secondly, each piece had to have something that was full color. So from a magazine like National Geographic or something that was a clay-based magazine or book where when I chalked over it, it wouldn't cover up that color. The color would stay very visible. And then the third part was using the encaustic wax and having something drawn back into each piece that I went in with the oil stick. So it was a really fun process. I think it took a little longer than Susan wanted it to. But I really, really enjoyed it. When I work, what I've been realizing over the last couple of years that I work from words. It's very much how I work. And it wasn't always something conscious. And now it very much is. And so pulling from her work was just really inspiring. And I just read it. I'll read it over and over again. And whatever words flew out at me or images flew out at me, I would just go find something that represented that or write something down. And they just sort of wove themselves together as I worked on each one. And I really loved doing it. So thank you guys for being here tonight and being willing to take time out of your Sunday evenings to share this time with us. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'd like to start tonight with, I'm only going to talk for about 12 minutes, but I'd like to start with some words by a poet and a theologian. The poet is Wendell Berry, and this is the 3rd stanza from his poem, How to Be a Poet. Accept what comes from silence. Make the best you can of it. Of the little words that come out of the silence like prayers prayed back to the one who prays. Make a poem that does not disturb the silence from which it came. And then these words are from Ellen Davis, a theologian and good friend who was on Being, the radio program with Krista Tippett, and she said these words: "You can't read poetry in distraction. Poetry slows you down. Anything in our world now that slows us down is to be valued, and maybe is a gift and a calling from God." And I feel like for me that poetry is a gift and a calling from God. So I need to start with Checkout, since that is the one for the Walmart clerk that Thomas sent out in his missive to everyone on his email distribution list. Checkout for the Walmart clerk. Did you find everything you need, ma'am? If those goldfish are anything like the rest of us, they want to get out of here as soon as possible. Have a nice day. And then the first poem that I gave to Ginger, written down on a little scrap of paper to see if she got my poetry. And it's Ligaments, which is this one over here behind Charlotte next to Brian, which we now own because Brian bought me for Christmas last year. Ligaments. Wind scatters the dim bones as they try to reflesh and walk. The next poem I'm going to read is for all my literary friends, readers, women's book club, writers, and it was written for Nikki Finney, who just last week received the National Book Award for Poetry. I took classes with her at the University of Kentucky when I was doing my master's there in poetry and wrote an autobiography with her there. Potsherds for Nikki Finney. Her words spin symmetrical as a potter's wheel, casting off bits of wisdom like clay water into dry air. Her breath shapes deliberately as a potter's hands, molding the clay minds of people who hear her poetry into sacred vessels. When her words cease, her breath will live in the finely formed pots till death rattles each to shards and dust for new clay. This next one is Mother, which Ginger might need to turn around for folks to be able to see.
You're fine.
And I would like to this evening dedicate this to all of the women in my life who have been mentors, friends, confidants, inspiration, and especially to my sister Edie, who is an amazing mother, and my niece Pearl, who is about to become an amazing mother. Mother, what I want is wisdom like that of the crone, whose well-traveled feet have found homes in moccasins, thongs, clogs, and tight cotton binding, whose lean legs have climbed, hurdled, run, walked, lain still in folded meditation, whose womb has birthed mountains, meadows, oceans, me, whose breasts have swayed freely, been strapped, bound, hidden away, or removed by Amazon warriors so arrow could fly from bow, whose arms have cradled babes, embraced the dying, whose hands have planted and gathered, caressed lovers, written magic, whose voice has chanted mantras, sung gospel, anthems, blues, shouted praise, silenced silence. This next one is for a very good friend who even poetry can't tell her how much she means to me. Yoga for Barbara Schauer, who taught me to view my body as a robe of honor instead of a burden, and my mind as a big open sky instead of a prison. Mind smoothing, eye relaxing, neck straightening, throat loosening, shoulder dropping, back expanding, heart shining, arm lengthening, finger mapping, abdomen tightening, buttock brightening, hip opening, leg strengthening, foot stretching, toe spreading, body prayer, Om. When I first came to Western North Carolina, I was in a bit of not a great space. Moved in with my parents and volunteered at First Call for Help And you were not supposed to help the people who called. You were supposed to send them to the social services that could help them. Well, a Vietnam veteran called and needed to be taken to the vet hospital over the county lines in a different county. And for some reason, our social services couldn't do that. So I drove him to see the doctor at that veteran hospital, and he got to see the doctor, and I got this poem. And it's with a piece of artwork right here behind Charlotte. Vietnam vet. He's got it down to an art like a well-learned dance. More than 1 foot is always in contact with the sidewalk. His soles scuff along the unforgiving cement. Hands fly like weak birds to his chest, trying to protect his caged heart from bullets and bombs. The sun through ginkgo leaves plays a mottled tune on his face. Lips quiver in response to the echoes of his past. And this poem is for all of my cycling friends who are here. Bike Pantone. One of my passions is to road ride, especially out North Carolina Highway 9, up and over the Eastern Continental Divide, where green pastures and blue skies are mine. Especially out North Carolina Highway 9, many cyclists love to spin. Green pastures and blue skies are mine. To not ride would be a sin. Where cyclists love to spin up and over the Eastern Continental Divide, to not ride would be a sin. One of my passions is to road ride. This book of 24 poems is divided into 3 chapters. Cat Cow Publishing, my nod to yoga and how important that is in my life. The first chapter is Human Nature. It's either about human or nature. The second chapter is Goddesses. And the third chapter is Resurrection. And this poem, the last one I'll read from this book, is the opening poem for the chapter Resurrection. And then I'll end with one poem that is not in this book, just to let you know I'm still writing. And this is Dancing Hands, which also has an artwork with it. It did not make it to this book. That's one of the foibles of self-publishing. We didn't have an editor telling us, hey, where's the encaustic art for this one? Dancing Hands for Bharat. Bharat wore his smile a little too tightly, like a ring that wouldn't come off, but I hadn't measured the fit then. His hands reiterated the words he spoke. It was nerves, but I thought it was only conversation dance, and I didn't count the dangerous steps in his choreography. His low voice was often cracked by laughter, like grass that sprouts where pavement breaks. His nerves were wound so tight that his soul was coiled, poised to spring from that trap of flesh. Bharat sprung that trap last night with his own dancing hands. He freed his soul from its body, took his life, and gave it a new name. And this last poem has been bouncing around in my head and my heart for several months, and I finally wrote it down the last day of November, before the Sunday, for Brian Lee Cole. On Wednesday and Thursday, before the Sunday Brian is to preach, he can be found in his study writing his sermon, seated at his beautiful wooden table in front of the oversized window that looks out at the seven sisters marching him up toward heaven. On Friday, before the Sunday Brian is to preach, he can be found asking me if I would like to hear his sermon, give him feedback. Suggestions are welcomed. Accolades are more welcomed. On Saturday, before the Sunday Brian is to preach, I can be found in my red chaise lounge, listening to his sermon, glass of red wine in hand, eyes and heart intent on my man, relaxing into my favorite activity of the week. His sermon, preached to me only, is gift straight up, blessing cold pressed, grace locally grown, and I rise and fall in love again. Thank you. So there's more food, there are more books, and Ginger and I will be up here signing if you want to bring your books up here, and we'll be glad to sign them for you. And please just mingle and know that you are a great blessing to both me and Ginger for showing up tonight. We really appreciate it. And some of her artwork is for sale as well.